Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Star Trek Online. This is the Doctor and I am continuing our coverage of the Odyssey Cruiser. In the last video we looked at the Odyssey Operations Cruiser. All of them lean toward engineering since they all have a Commander Engineering Bridge Officer slot. But the Operations Cruiser, which makes no sense. Well, anyway, the Operations Cruiser leans more heavily toward that because it has more engineering console slots and other features that give it a more engineering stance. And I used all of those bridge officer stations to really focus on the engineering aspects. All of the cruisers, all of the Odyssey cruisers share a similar trait in their weapon layout and so forth. And so if you really want to get a good overview of the Odyssey Cruiser and an introduction to all the specifications and what makes them unique, please go see that first introduction video on the Operations Cruiser. I'll put up a link so that you can go see that if you haven't seen that first intro video. That will really go over the Odyssey Cruisers for you in general, and you can learn what the differences are between them. This one that I'm showing today is the Science Cruiser, so I'm going to focus on science abilities for this cruiser. Now, it's still going to have a Commander Engineering Bridge Officer slot, but I'm going to utilize the Universal Lieutenant Commander slot as my science slot for my Science Bridge Officer powers. And I'm going to gear this ship to do science abilities, and I'm going to use some science abilities that I have not done in the past. Typically on my science ships I like to do Gravity Well, Tychon's Rift. If you've seen any of my videos and any of my ships with science vessels, you've seen the common thread basically that I have with using science powers. I like those powers. But on this ship I wanted to do something different so we could look at science powers in a different way on this cruiser. And instead of Gravity Well, Tychon's Rift and all those things, I'm going to be using a lot of draining abilities, and I'll look at all that, but it's going to be a little different. I'm using powers I've never used before in these videos, and hopefully that'll mix things up and show you guys a different way you can build science ships. But first of all, let's look at this ship, read a little bit about it and its stats. And as you can see, it's blue. It's got the blue kind of coloring on it. That just shows that it's science. And the worker bees here are its native console ability. Otherwise, it looks exactly like the Operations Cruiser. There is no difference in how it looks. The pinnacle of Federation starship design, the Odyssey Science Cruiser improves on the base Odyssey Star Cruiser design with improved science capabilities intended for the most difficult of missions. Odyssey-class vessels are the largest vessels. Of course, we already know that, blah, blah, blah. The Odyssey class is designed as extreme, blah, 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 we know that. In addition, the Odyssey Science Cruiser features a Work Bees Universal Console module. This console allows you to deploy 4 Work Bees CMU's cargo management units that will follow and repair your vessel or an allied vessel. The Work Bee console can be equipped on any Odyssey. You can take all of the consoles from the other Odysseys and put them on one ship. So we are going to do that, of course. So here's the stats on that. 2,500 crew, 4 aft weapons, 4 device slots, 1 lieutenant tactical, 1 commander engineering. So you're not going to get away from that commander engineering. 1 lieutenant science, 1 ensign universal, 1 lieutenant commander universal. So that's the obvious choice of where we're going to put our science officer to do the most space bridge powers that we can for science. Unfortunately, we're not going to get a Commander Science Bridge Officer power, so it's not a 100% true science-focused ship because it lacks that power. But it does have some other features that lean it more towards science. 2 tactical, 4 engineering, 4 science, so it balances out and gives you 4 science console slots, but still only 2 tactical. But that's kind of usual for a science ship anyway. But it's a little more heavy on the engineering console slots than you would typically find on a science vessel. So it's a pretty good tanking kind of science vessel. 42,000 hull strength, 6 degrees per second. It's a very slow science vessel. 1.1 shield modifier. Now that I think is lower? I can't remember. I think what the operations, let me just check real quick. The operations Yeah, the shield modifier on the operations is 1.15. So that's actually just slightly higher. So there is a difference there. 1.1 shield modifier, 1.15. Yep. No getting around that. It is got a slightly less shield modifier, believe it or not, on the science ship. And that's a little counterintuitive to other science ships, because if you look and compare cruisers in this game to science ships typically have the highest shield modifiers. That means a higher shield capacity. So the fact that this one lessens that compared to the engineering version, that is different compared to all the other ships in the game. That's abnormal. So that I just figured, I just learned that myself. I didn't know that. Impulse modifier 0.15, maximum warp, plus 10 power to shields and auxiliary. That plus 10 to auxiliary is useful as a science ship. Advanced quantum slipstream, sensor analysis. That's a science-specific power. So that is another thing that helps lean it a little more towards science. The Work B console, and as a cruiser though, it maintains all of the communications array abilities: strategic maneuvering, shield frequency modulation, weapon system efficiency, and attract fire. So that makes it a really appealing cruiser for a science character, because it maintains all those cruiser command abilities. And naturally, I have all three consoles because I own all three ships, so I'm going to use all three consoles on this ship to show you its full abilities that it's capable of. I am on my science character. This is the Doctor. He is my main character. He is science. He was the very first character I ever created in this game. So now I'm going to bring up, and we are going to look at my build for this ship. Disclaimer, as always, this build works for me, it may not work for you. Everyone builds ships differently. There's a million different ways you can build it, and that's all good and fine. Leave your comments and let me know what your builds are like and what works for you. On my specific build, before we go into it, my goal with this build is drainage. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I want to drain shield power, I want to drain energy power, I want to drain power, drain anything I can from the enemy ship. And that's my new take on science abilities that I haven't shown you guys in the past. I have used these abilities in the past, but I have not made a video about these abilities or using a science ship in this way. Normally I am an offensive science character, meaning I use things like Gravity Well and Tychon's Rift and things that do like really offensive type of damage. But this type of ship is more like draining energy, I guess. Well, you'll see. When we go over the powers, you'll see how I've done that, and it'll make sense. I think. I hope. Anyway, there are some things I'm lacking that I do not have yet, and I just don't have the time to grind for them right now. I want to go ahead and make this video so you guys can see this. It wouldn't make a difference anyway, to be honest with you. I'm missing some fleet weapons that I would like to have. For some reason, I only have 2 fleet Tachyon Beam arrays, and that's all I had. I need more because this ship has a lot of options for beam arrays. And obviously, as you can see, I'm going with beam weapons, but specifically I'm going with Tachyon. And I'm going with Tachyon for a very, very specific reason on this science ship. Tachyon space weapons have a chance to reduce the target's shield damage resistance. So it's all about reducing the enemy to nothing. And Tachyon energy type will help me with that. It will help me tear down their shields even more. So Tachyon was the obvious choice on this science ship, on this science character, to use for how I'm doing things. Unfortunately, I don't have the fleet level Tachyon beams that I wish I had. I've got 2 here, and as you can see, they are damage ×2, accuracy ×2. And if you recall, on the operations cruiser, I was using anti-proton, and I was using damage ×3, accuracy or just accuracy, just 1 accuracy. I've corrected that finally on this character and got the damage ×2, accuracy ×2, so I have more accuracy. But the way I look at it anyway is that if you're going to be a science character flying a science ship, you should be all about accuracy. You should be all about sensors, all about being precise, Science to me seems to like you would be precise. You would always get a weapons lock. Your sensors would be extremely powerful. That just seems to be what a science character would be. So for me, I want as much accuracy as I can get on a science character. I really, really, really like accuracy. It is also, of course, beneficial for a tactical character too. But I really look at accuracy as an important thing for a science character because, in general, the science career in Star Trek Online does not do the most DPS. It does not do the most damage. It just simply doesn't. So you have to make up for that in other ways. So one way you can make up for that is to be very accurate and always get accurate hits. And the second way is to get a lot of critical hits, because that's really the only way you're going to do a lot of damage. So a high critical chance and a high critical severity is also important on a science character. That's how you can make up for lacking that raw DPS. Anyway, I don't have that. As you can see, 1, 2, 3 of my beams are not the fleet level. I bought these actually in the exchange. They are still Mark 12, very rare, so they're still pretty powerful. And I actually do have 2 accuracy on them and only 1 damage. So they're not as powerful as the fleet weapons. This is 186, that's 192 DPS. They're not as powerful, but they still have 2 times accuracy. I made sure to get weapons that had that. So they're still not bad. For this demonstration in this video and doing the Borg STFs, this will be sufficient. But in the long run, I would like to replace these with just the fleet level. Same thing with the dual beam bank. I again do not have a fleet level dual beam bank, but if I had one, I would replace this one, because although this is an okay weapon, this is not as much damage as a fleet weapon would be. This is the hyper dual refracting Tachyon Beam Bank Mark 12, very rare. This comes from the Nukara reputation. It is one of the space weapons you can purchase, and it's actually part of the Nukara appropriated munitions set. And I showed that set to you on a Tholian Orb Weaver. I took this from that build and put it on here to fill in as a dual beam bank until I can get a fleet level dual beam bank. But I wanted a dual beam bank up front for the same reason as I did on the Operations Cruiser. When I am firing forward, I want as much punch and as much damage as I can do, and dual beam banks do a lot more damage than a single beam bank. This is 234 DPS and has 186. Dual beam banks are always going to do a lot more. So I want at least one of those. It has a 90-degree targeting arc, so of course it only works at a certain angle, but when it works, it gives you more punch up front. As for my torpedo, I also went with the gravimetric photon torpedo on this character. I just love that torpedo. It's got a good effect. It does. It's got that 33% chance that upon detonation it creates a 1 kilometer radius gravimetric rift, and you will see that gravimetric rift pretty much proc all the time. It's a thing that just works, and I like that. Of course, you can put your own type of torpedo on here, build it how you want. But that's what I went for this particular build. That gravimetric torpedo, of course, is in the Dyson Sphere reputation. Now, as for the space set on this one, this is where things get unique. I'm actually using the Solanae Overcharge Warp Core Mark 12 instead of some other options that I have available to me. I do have an Elite Fleet Reinforced Warp Core, and in fact I also have an Advanced Fleet Reinforced Warp Core. Both of these are good. They do weapon to shield. This one does weapon power to shield power, a shield capacity, and other things. This one also is good. This one has also weapons to shields, weapons cap, W cap, and EWS is something else. Well, it's got a weapon power buff. So I have some good options. I'm really, I could change this around. The reason why I have this on here now is because of its focus on auxiliary power. Plus 7.5 additional auxiliary power, bonus increases at low, plus 5 maximum auxiliary power. This also resists subsystem offline status, so that was good. Add 7.5% of your weapon power to your auxiliary power. So instead of weapons to shields, this is weapons to auxiliary. and whereas these two were weapons to shields. So these would add to my shield power and increase my shield power. But on this particular build, I wanted the highest auxiliary power because I'm going to show you guys these powers that I'll be using, and auxiliary power is really important. And this ship by far has the highest base auxiliary power I've ever had on a ship, and this warp core is helping do that. And as you can see, also it's got a battery capacitors and auxiliary power buff that I can enable that gives me plus 15 auxiliary power for 10 seconds to increase it even more. So this warp core that I'm using is all about auxiliary power. I'm trying to really buff that auxiliary power on this ship and make it the best science ship I can, the best science cruiser I can. Now, as for the deflector and impulse and all that, again, I'm using a mixed set, just like I had on the operations cruiser. I was using a mixed Mako, adapted Mako. I'm doing the same here, except that I've got it reversed. I'm using the 2-piece bonus from the adapted Mako on this ship, whereas I was using the 2-piece bonus from Mako on the other ship. This one, the 2-piece bonus, is tactical readiness. This increases my torpedo damage by plus 25%, but again, what was important to me, this is a plus 8.8 auxiliary power setting, and it also slowly returns missing crew to disabled status. It's got a resistance to crewman loss and an increased crew recovery rate. So the bonus on the adapted Mako set was more useful on this science ship because of that boosted auxiliary power setting. Plus, I'm going to get more torpedo damage out of it. Remember, I told you science doesn't do as much damage anyway, so anything I can to increase my damage like that, plus 25% to torpedo damage, is going to be useful. So that's why I went with the adapted Mako 2-piece set instead of the Mako 2-piece set, which, just to remind us, was magnetoplasma relays, which was power recharge speed and resist shield drain and energy drain, which made sense on my engineering cruiser as I was building that to tank a lot. But this ship I'm building to do science powers, so it's a little different. I am using the adapted Mako shield, however, still, so I get the maximum shield capacity that's possible. And then, of course, the adapted Mako engine to go with that, which also, by the way, does increase weapon power, shield power, and auxiliary power. You can see right there on that list, plus 3.8 weapon power, plus 3.8 shield power, plus 3.8 auxiliary power. Another reason why the adapted Mako impulse engine made more sense than the Mako impulse engine on this ship. And then the deflector. This one improves shield healing, shield hit or ship hit points, shield hit points, improves power transfer rate, resists hold, disable, knock, repel, and slow, and improves knock, repel, and slow. So that made sense. Beyond, I could have put the adapted Mako deflector here, but I compared the stats, and the Mako deflector, it had better of what I wanted for this ship. So that's the setup. It's a mixed setup, but it works. Of course, also the kinetic cutting beam, which goes in with the Universal Simulated Module to, of course, give me Omega Weapon Amplifier, and that, again, will increase our weapon power and weapon resistance. Now, in addition, I do have my EPS console. I never leave home without it, and I do have my Engineering Enhanced Neutronium Alloy Fleet version. This gives kinetic damage and all energy damage resistance, plus improves ship hit points, so that I have even greater ship hit points. I could have exchanged this for an RCS, the fleet level RCS. Also would be another option I could have put there, but I already had this one, so I used it. For my science consoles, I am using a field generator just to give me a better shield capacity, because I'm thinking of this as a tanking science ship. It's a cruiser science ship, so I want to increase that shield capacity. Now this console, I am now sold on this console. I got this recently when I did my Tholian Orb Weaver build and showed the Nukara reputation and showed all the Nukara stuff you could get from that. And I said in that video that I have found that I love this console on a science ship. And here's why. First of all, +5 to shield power, so you're going to get a higher shield power setting on your science ship. That's going to be nice. Resist shield drain and energy drain, so that's nice. And then improves exotic damage. So anything that we use with any exotic damage science abilities are improved with this console, and that would be Feedback Pulse, Tychon's Rift, Photonic Shockwave, Gravity Well, Tachyon Beam, Eject Warp Plasma, Aceton Assimilators, Vent Theta Radiation, and Isometric Charge. Any of those are boosted by this console because it boosts exotic damage. The only one ability that I'm using right now, however, is going to be the Tachyon Beam, and that's because of the Commander Engineering Station. I'm not using Gravity Well or Tychon's Rift this time, but normally I do. But this console also has other reasons. I was talking about accuracy. This gives a +10% accuracy with beam weapons. So you put this on a science ship with beam weapons, +10% accuracy across the board. So it really fits a science vessel well. It increases accuracy, it improves exotic damage, and it resists shield drain and energy drain, which is good too, and increases shield power. It's just a good console on a science ship. I like it. Now for my tactical consoles, I split them up. This time I did one that gives us more critical chance and one that gives us more critical severity. Remember, I said both are important on a science ship because you need to make up for the loss of damage potential. So you increase your critical chance and increase your critical severity, and you're off to a good start. Now, because this ship has, or I own all 3 ships, I was able to put all 3 consoles on this ship. Here's the worker bees. This is what comes with this ship specifically. So if I didn't have the other 2 consoles, that would give me more console space room. But I do have the other 2 consoles because I want to show all the powers available to you. So here's the Chevron separation and the Aquarius. You've seen these in use if you watch the Operations Odyssey ship. Basically, it's all the same here. Nothing really different. I'm getting a set 2 and set 3 bonus from having all 3 of these. That's increasing my flight turn rate by 1. It's my recharge time has been reduced on this console set. It improves energy damage resistance, kinetic damage resistance, and power transfer rate. And then I'm also getting the enhanced Chevron separation, which is allowing my Odyssey saucer to deploy worker bees and that Gravity Well 3. So even though I'm not using Gravity Well 3 as a bridge officer power, because I have all 3 console sets, my saucer has gained the ability to do Gravity Well 3 when I'm in Chevron separation mode. But however, you cannot manually enable that ability. It is an automatic ability, and the saucer will just do it when it feels like it. But it will be more useful on this ship than it was on the Engineering Operations Odyssey, because I have my auxiliary buffed on this ship a whole lot higher, and that auxiliary power being higher will translate into that Gravity Well 3 ability being much more powerful on this ship, on this character, than it did on the other one. So that is another benefit to this ship, is having that ability, and then having with the auxiliary buffed, it's going to be really good. So finally, let's look at the stations. I'm stuck with the Commander Engineering. There's nothing I could do. However, I could use Tachyon Beam 3, and if you recall, exotic damage is the type of damage that Tachyon Beam is. So that console, that Nukara console I have, boosting exotic damage, is boosting my Tachyon Beam 3's ability. This is a radiation damage every 1 second for 30 seconds, and it also is an all energy damage, minus 75% all energy damage for 30 seconds on the enemy. So this again will help me just tear down the enemy a little faster. I am also using directed energy modulation 2, again to help me bring down their shields. This one is shield penetrating energy damage per pulse. I also have Engineering Team 2, Emergency Power to Weapons 1. Now let's go to Tactical Powers before we go to Science. Beam Fire at Will 2, Tactical Team 1, and Torpedo High Yield 1. Pretty much the same I had on the Engineering Cruiser. But now it comes to the fun stuff. I can use that Lieutenant Commander Universal slot for my science and do some fun sciencey powers on this ship. And so I am. I am using Energy Siphon 2. This basically is minus 12 all power settings for 6.7 seconds. And after 3 seconds, plus 12 all power settings for 6.7 seconds to myself. I am also using Tachyon Beam 2. This basically will deplete their shields. Negative 0.82 all shields, each pulse 10 pulse max. And then I can hold them in place with my tractor beam and beat down on them with my science vessel. That's the goal. And then I have a couple of Healy things too, like Science Team 2 and Hazard Emitters. Let's look at this in space, and we'll look at the stats in space just to make sure they're correct. Normally the stats don't show up on ground. You have to go to space to see the actual stat numbers. So I'm going to go back and check and make sure all those stats were correct or not. So here's the actual stats now that we're in space. It is minus 15 all power settings for 17.5 seconds. And then after 3 seconds, plus 15 all power settings for 17 seconds to myself. That's Energy Siphon 2. Tachyon Beam 2 is minus 100, that's a lot better there, that's better than what we were seeing on ground. Minus 179.8 all shields, each pulse, 10 pulse max. Tractor Beam. Tractor Beam is actually going to do kinetic damage as well. Notice that, 50 DPS. It's actually doing kinetic damage when you use the Tractor Beam. The Aceton Beam is 1 minute 30 second recharge, minus 164.2 radiation damage every 1 second for 30 seconds, negative 75% all energy damage for 30 seconds. Directed energy modulation is plus 36.2 shield penetrating energy damage per pulse. So those are the stats. Those are the real stats. So as you can see, I am a shield draining and energy draining science ship this time, rather than Gravity Well, Tychon's Rifts, and other things. So a little bit different, and I think you'll like it. 2,500 crew complement, 210% power transfer rate, 61,000 hull. That's a little bit less than the Operations Cruiser. I was at like 63 or something, so a little bit less. Shield capacity is also at 15.4. That's a little bit less. I think I was at 18,000 on the Operations Odyssey. This is at 15, so a lower hull and a lower shield capacity than the Operations Odyssey. Also a lower resistance. I believe I was at 38%, and on this one I'm at 35%. So a little less resist. So a little less of everything, but it's the science powers that will make this unique. 25% bonus accuracy. I wish that was higher, but that's what I got right now. 9% critical chance, though. I've got a little bit of a higher critical chance, I think, than the last ship, maybe. Not as high critical severity, but the critical chance will help me land more critical hits. Let's go into movement. .3 degrees per second is my current turn rate, so that is buffed up from the defaults. But here's what makes it really fun. Look at my power settings. Yep, that's right. 81 auxiliary out of the gate. 89 shield, so that's not a terrible power shield, and a 118 weapon. Engine is decent. Low, it's low, but considering that these three are relatively high, that's impressive. So 81 auxiliary is really going to boost my auxiliary power. And I have the battery capacitor. I can enable that. Bam, I can get 96 auxiliary power when I use that battery. 96. I'm going to let that cool down, then I'll try the red matter and see what the difference is. So 96 if I use the battery. That is going to really allow me to do a lot of sciencey type damage. Let's look real quick while that's cooling down, so you can see my DPS and everything. 784 DPS, and that's the fleet weapon. That's the one with the most damage. Damage times 2. And accuracy times 2. As you can see, that's less DPS than I was making on the Operations Odyssey Cruiser with the anti-proton beams, even though they were the same fleet weapons closely, just one modifier difference. A lot less DPS on the science character. A lot less. 784, 770, 983 for the dual Tetryon, so that's pretty high compared to the other ones. The kinetic cutting beam is still doing the most DPS at 1009, so that's crazy. So we had 96 when I used the battery. Using red matter is a lot more, 106. So if I want to get the absolute best, you can't use both at the same time, unfortunately, but if I want to get the best auxiliary power, I'm going to want to use red matter over the battery capacitor. But unless one is on cooldown, then I can obviously only use the other one. Here's the one of the unique abilities for the science vessel. Sensor analysis has now been placed as an icon, so make sure to put that on your power tray. It's no longer an automatic thing, it's an activatable power. I can, there's all the stats on it, you can read that. I can do it on myself if I have nothing selected.
Warning, ship is under attack.
But actually it went to the next closest ship anyway. But if I point at a ship, I can do it on a specific person like that. But if I get out of the way of everybody, it will apply to myself. I think I just need to be away from people. Now that I'm away from everyone. Nope, you can't do it. So you do have to be close to somebody to do it. Well, I just learned something. Anyway, that's sensor analysis. As for the other features, we've seen this, of course, on the Operations. Same thing. Here's the worker bees. There they go. They're really tiny, hard to see, but they're there. You can see them better here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. The worker bees, chevron separation. It's going to give me a lot better turn rate. A lot more maneuverable. Much better. Recall that. There we go, let that come back. Then we can do the Aquarius. And we have that going for us. You can have the worker bees out with chevron separation or Aquarius. However, you cannot be chevron separated and Aquarius at the same time. So that's that. So here's my science abilities. I'm looking forward to using Tachyon Beam 2, Energy Siphon, the Aceton Beam, that's the engineering power actually. Here's my photonic fleet for being a science officer, fleet supports. Sensor analysis, here's all my science abilities. Sensor scan, subnucleonic beam, scattering field. I also have this one from the new car Reputation. This is the Refracting Tetryon Cascade. This is more useful on this ship because it deals with Tetryon weapons, and this does Tetryon damage. It's basically a chain effect Tetryon damage. So this will actually be beneficial with this ship, whereas it wasn't too useful on the Operations Odyssey because I was using anti-protons. On this ship I'm using Tetryon, so this ability is actually useful on this ship. Directed energy modulation right there. Have some more abilities. Here's the command abilities just to show you. Yes, it's a cruiser, so you get the weapon system efficiency. You've got the shield frequency. You got all of them on this ship. So very nice. Because of the Solanae warp core, I've got that subspace fold, and then of course the advanced quantum slipstream drive. I believe, hopefully, that's all the unique abilities. I think I got everything on this one there. So that's what I got. Sensor targeting assault. That's part of the Romulan reputation. I have, just so you can see under reputations, traits, I I have the sensor targeting assault from the Romulan reputation. You will render your target's weapons offline when you land a critical hit in space combat, as long as this effect is active. A successful critical hit will consume this effect temporarily, which will refresh 20 seconds later. So I have that going. I've also got precision for a more critical hit chance, and enhanced shield penetration. Ignores 5% of your target's shields with directed energy attacks. And then I've got auxiliary power configuration set to defense. All of this, as you can see, is all about auxiliary power and all about getting through their shields or landing critical hits on them. My active powers, obviously there's the Refracting Tachyon Cascade. And I do have the Quantum Singularity Manipulation as well. Yeah, there it is. I don't really use it much, but I've got it. I should use it more because it gives plus 100 to science stats for 8 seconds. So I really should enable it before I use science powers, because that would be really useful. It only lasts for 8 seconds though, and then there's a long cooldown. But I don't really use it much, but I need to more because it's there and it helps. Anyway, that's it. Let's go do the same things we did with the Operation Cruiser. We'll go do the 2 Taldewa patrols, and you can see these abilities in action on this science-y cruiser ship. I guess this time we'll just quickly go there. Don't waste any time.
Jolan true. We must work to security.
Okay, we'll start at Karaya. And then we'll go to Jarret after that, or not Jarret, whatever the other one is I use, Japori. And I will try to utilize the science abilities more in this ship. In the last one, I heavily showed you the worker bees, the chevron separation, and the Aquarius. So I kind of feel like that you've seen that and you know what those are like. I'm going to try to remember to use my science abilities more so you can see what that's like on this cruiser. Now I will get the worker bees out because that's just a given. That you can always do. And I guess I will use Aquarius or chevron separation as needed. I'll start off, though, as a whole. Actually, I know what I'll do. Let's do this. Let's get my worker bees out and the Aquarius. We'll start with that. There we go. Worker bees, Aquarius. Okay.
Warning.
Let's
Ship
try
is
that.
under attack. Warning. Ship is under attack. Target's shield has failed.
Let's use some draining abilities.
Target's shields have failed.
I want to target the Mogai here. Do that. And do that. This is Tachyon Beam right now. Really draining their shields, as you can see.
Target's shield has failed.
Mogai, let's do an energy siphon.
Left shield failing. Hull integrity below 75%. Target shield has failed.
I got so many powers to activate, it's hard to concentrate. easily handled. So since I used the Aquarius on this system, I'll do the chevron separation on the next system. It's hard to remember to use all my powers. I want to use the big ones like the Tachyon Beam and Energy Siphon on the big ships. This will really come in handy more when we do the Borg, because I can use the Energy Siphon and all that on the Borg cubes, and maybe even the gates and the transformers. I'm gonna try at least see what I can use on them. But I really like the draining abilities. I know it's kind of hard to tell how well it's working in a run like that, because that's not a difficult run. But I will try to use them better when we do the Borg in the next video. They are really useful on the big ships. On the small ships, you don't really have enough time to use them. But on the big ships, really comes in handy. So I'll do this. Let's do this. Let's go to the Enterprise just showed up. Let's do this. Let's go to the big ship. Where are you, big ship? You're just there. You are. Let's do the Talon. Let's do power up, and then we will do both of my draining abilities.
Warning. Ship is under attack.
And that. There we go. Now I got all those draining abilities. And look how fast he's going down. Check that out. That's what I'm talking about right there. I didn't even use the directed energy modulation. And I forgot to do sensor scan, so there were still more things I could have done there.
Target's shields have failed.
There's a gravity well.
Target's shields have failed.
Everybody's dead. Wow. That was good. That was fun. Okay, let's bring everything back together. So there you go, guys. That is a quick look at the Science Odyssey, and I hope you all enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. As you can see, the ship can be built for science, even though you lack that commander science ability. You still have some pretty good options available to you. Plus, it's probably the most tankiest science vessel there is. But I don't know. Maybe there's the other ones. There's some other ships out there that are worthy as well, possibly as a science ship, a tanky science ship. But this one ain't bad. This is not bad. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you use the Science Odyssey. I know that a lot of people tend to lean toward either the Engineering Odyssey, the Operations, or the Tactical one, and not so much the Science one. But I don't know. I think this could be an alright science vessel, even though it lacks that Commander Science ability. It's not bad. It's not terrible. It performs quite well, actually. So thank you for watching, and as always, stay tuned for the next one as we warp out.